Hi, and thank you for the invitation to this keynote. I'm Lotte Harbo, and I work here at Vange University College in Denmark in continuing education with a specific focus on social pedagogy. And I've had social pedagogy as a part of my professional life since for a lot of years, 25 years or so. I think I've been working as a social pedagogue, and I've focused my continuing education on social pedagogy, and now I'm focusing my research on social pedagogy. And I've got a colleague. Charlotte, you can introduce yourself.
And also for me, thank you for the invitation. And yes, I am Lotte's colleague, and I also work here at the VIA. I'm not a real social pedagogue, but I've been focusing and working with and as a social pedagogue with people in socially marginalized or excluded positions, mostly youngsters and adults, and well, drug addicts, homelessness, and criminology and stuff like that, like this. And in Denmark, we talk about social work and we talk about social pedagogy, and it's kind of the target group that is also part of deciding what,
which profession you draw on.
Exactly. So that's why I say I'm not trained as a social pedagogue. I'm trained as a social worker or a social counselor. It would be in the English context, but in Denmark, even though I'm trained as a social worker, my field or my profession is more comparable to social pedagogue.
Yeah, it's more like youth work or street level work and so on. Yeah.
And again, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
thank you for actually that we can do it online, which is quite handy.
Yeah, it is. And we've agreed with Robin that at some point during the day, your day, we'll be connected somehow, and it'll be possible to ask questions and maybe engage in a bit of dialogue in that sense. But now we've got approximately 30 minutes, I think, more or less. We'll have a look at the watch. Yes, that counts. We are going to focus. We've read the call, of course, for the conference, and we specifically took sort of notice of the link between togetherness and social distancing, and that brought us to a reflection on how these concepts, corona or no corona, has actually always been a part somehow of social pedagogy. So there's always been a question of how to, for the social pedagogue and for the human being that the social pedagogue is sort of aiming social pedagogy towards. It's always been a question on how to handle both being near or together and having that, or sort of handling that distance that that we see as a common part of social pedagogy, because we are not private companions with the people that we meet in our practice, and we do not love, or I expect that we do not love the children that we meet in care in the same way that we love our own children. There is a distance. There is a distance as a common part of our field and our professionalism. Mm-hmm. But there's always a question about being near and being together and establishing a sense of closeness, togetherness with the people that we meet in our practice. And we're gonna focus on the presentation here on how we, in some of our research, see examples of actually the social pedagogue withdrawing the possibility of helping the human being, because the human being, the person, in this case, a former homeless, rejects on engaging in sort of conversations where he tells the social pedagogue about sensitive subjects in his life. So in that sense, and the key point is how do social pedagogues handle this paradox between being close, being together, and having some sort of distance? And it can take all shapes and forms, and you know all about that from your practice, but that's the paradox that we're going to address today, and hopefully also in our discussions later. I'll just have a look at the other. That leads me to you.
Thank you. It's just important again to underline that this is, it might, the Corona situation might have brought a new light or a new perspective on this paradox, but it's definitely not new. It's forever existing in social pedagogy. And to illustrate this paradox, we would, or we will, as you said, just draw upon an example from our current research. We are doing research in a living community with the five houses,
Yeah.
and they are all former homeless. Well, people, human beings,
Yeah.
client users, whatever we call them, however we categorize them. But where five houses, five people live in that living community. And this example kind of illustrates how we kind of ask and expect different things. One of the guys living in this, in a house in this living community went up to the social pedagogue and asked for help. They're kind of having a plumbing situation at the living community. The plumbing is on the ground and they want it to go in the ground.
Yeah, between the houses, sort of. Yeah.
Exactly. The pipes are kind of on top and they want them to be in the ground. And he goes to the social pedagogue, who is a professional working at the living community, and says, we need help to solve this plumbing problem. And in this situation, the human being of this guy, he understands and expects that the conversation he's going to have with the social pedagogy, will be about the plumbing. But what happens is that the social pedagogue starts asking this guy about sensitive aspects of his life, about his family, his history, his former drug abuse. Maybe it's not an abuse, but that's the way the social pedagogue understands it. About his former working relationship, why he ended up in homelessness, etc., etc., etc.
Marriage, quite private
and sensitive, emotionally difficult aspects of his life. And this is a guy that expects that we're going to talk about plumbing, and in that way, just as you kind of illustrated it in the beginning, that you can say that the social pedagogue asks for togetherness. The social pedagogue wants a relationship with this guy living in a living community.
We could call him Paul.
We could call him Paul. Wants a relationship with Paul, and Paul actually just wants help with the plumbing. And the thing is that that these different expectations kind of collides, and it kind of addresses the paradox with the togetherness and the distance, because Paul expects, let's have a concrete, practical conversation about plumbing, and the professional wants a relationship, wants to know sensitive aspects about Paul's life before we talk about the plumbing.
Yeah, and in that sense, you could say that Paul signs up in this contract on this project, building its tiny houses that they built together. He signs up for participating in establishing a living community, and he has not signed up for a relationship with the social pedagogue. That's
relationship building activities that this asking about sensitive aspects of his life can be seen as. A relationship.
Yeah, and it's also as if in the situation that's described, we have the descriptions from both Paul and the social pedagogue, we could call him Michael. So we have both sides and the view from both sides of these situations. And Michael confirms that he tries to establish a relationship with both Paul and the other people who lives in the living community. And he does that through coffee dates and knocking on their door and inviting himself into their homes.
And it's quite clear that he's frustrated,
yes,
that he
Michael
does not succeed in actually creating this relationship with Paul and the other people in the living community. And it's quite clear, and he's quite clear about it. He says, I'm trying to build this relationship and nothing happens. So it's not like, it's not a hidden agenda. It's quite clear.
From both parties.
And an important, because this is the main question with the parallel of the main question. But the thing is that it's quite clear that Paul asked for help with the plumbing and Michael asked for a relationship. And as you say, they've signed up for living in this community. They've not signed up for therapy.
They haven't, and that's we have three sort of main points to withdraw from our little situation or our case here. And the first is that Paul hasn't signed up for therapy, and he's a well-grown man. He's been through his meetings, therapeutical sessions, etc., etc., and he has not signed up for that. What's actually motivating Paul to engaging in this project is the whole idea of being sort of engaged in a community where he can learn how to be a house owner. And he has not at all signed up for a relationship with the professionals, with the social pedagogy that has any resemblance of therapy whatsoever. He has almost an allergy towards it. So he thinks that he's there, and that is what it says in the contract as well, that he's there to learn how to build a house and how to be a house owner. And he expects to meet social pedagogy as a kind of help to living his everyday life and a specific sort of focus on the journey towards establishing a community. So he has this social focus, which links good with social pedagogy, which is actually not pedagogy, but social pedagogy, because we have the social focus. So what kind of structures, what kind of communities, what kind of contexts do we live in and do we operate in, and what kind of journeys do we then support in these social structures? So in that sense, you could say, and that's our theoretical analysis that points towards this, but you could say that actually Paul asks for the social in social pedagogy and not on the one-to-one, or he doesn't ask for the one-to-one relationship with the social pedagogue, but the social pedagogue replies to his requests for help with a wish to establish a one-to-one relationship. So in that sense, it's a clear point from here that social pedagogy is not therapy, and it has never been. There's another focus in social pedagogy.
And in Paul's signing up for help and support, which is supposed to be the primary task for the social pedagogue, this example shows that there's quite a gap between what Paul expects, help with the plumbing, and what the social pedagogue offers, kind of a sense of a form of therapy, and the distance between those two udgangspunkter,
offsprings.
Those two starting points is kind of too big, and therefore, even though the Michael, the pedagogue, the social pedagogue, wants togetherness, the gap increases the risk for a bigger distance, because the expectations and the starting points are so different. Which is, I might add, is quite funny. It's not funny, but the thing is, Paul is actually, but Paul is actually quite smart, because he asks for social pedagogy, and he understood what it is. I need help and support from everyday life with a specific focus on establishing this living community and learning how to live. So in that, Paul he's all in. He knows what he can expect, but the clash with the social pedagogue kind of takes him by surprise. And actually, in this concrete example, actually increases the distance. And in that sense, you need to think, or Michael need to think, that he has to go through the plumbing, just as the role of social pedagogy is meant to be. He has to offer the help and support with the everyday life. I mean, just doing and being. And then through the help with the plumbing, Michael might increase the possibilities of actually creating this togetherness and this relationship that is an important part of social pedagogy.
We'll practice that one later.
I'm sorry,
it's difficult.
It's my tongue. So again, Michael has to go through the plumbing to increase the possibilities of creating this togetherness and creating this relationship built on trust and on being near, and actually being able to talk about these sensitive aspects of the everyday life. If Paul
wishes to.
Exactly, if he kind of signs that contract, if he wants it, but you can't start with asking for togetherness and think that leads to a relationship, but you have to be emotional available as a social pedagogue, so that if Paul wants it, if the human being or the person or the client wants it, then you can actually go into the togetherness.
Yeah, and you could argue that in social pedagogy we have numerous sort of theoretical views on how to work with this. We have tools, we have all sorts, and common third is widely known, and somehow maybe the common third might sometimes be understood as a way of sort of having a main focus on how to establish relationships. But if we go back to the residential homes, where it was first sort of established as a theoretical concept, it's a home near Copenhagen here in Denmark, then it's quite clear that the key focus for working with the common third is not the relationship. The key focus is actually establishing learning situations that supports the journey towards the life that you're going to lead down the road. And in that sense, we see, and linking to the call of this conference, we see social pedagogy as a discipline and as a professionalism that offers different guiding principles that can support that journey. And relationships are important. Relationship building is a key element in social pedagogy, but it's not the key element. The key element is how to support people in moving towards the life that they wish to live. And in Paul's case, that comes down to a focus on, so how is he going to be able to be living as a house owner and participating in this living community, and actually taking part in, for instance, to have the community to sort of present itself as a nice place to be, with the plumbing or the pipes underground and so on.
Yeah, through help and support, the social pedagogue should strengthen Paul's possibilities of participating in different sorts of communities, and that's the core of what the social pedagogue should offer. In this case, Paul.
And in that sense, the key element in in what social pedagogy can offer when it comes to togetherness and social distance, and sort of something to navigate towards. But I think that I think our time is slowly coming up. So, but what we find in this situation as a very interesting aspect is that somehow the social pedagogue or social pedagogy, depending on how you look at it, rejects Paul's wish for help, for practical help, because Paul rejects to share sensitive elements from his life with the social pedagogy or social pedagogue, sorry. And that becomes a paradox that in this specific project actually leads to Paul and sort of Paul enhancing and sort of, he withdraws more, so the social distance simply becomes larger and larger,
which decreases social pedagogy's possibilities for actually helping in relevant ways.
Exactly.
Because Paul experienced that the help is not relevant. And in that way, well, it's a paradox, but in that way, because the social pedagogue or social pedagogy sees a togetherness and a relationship as the first step before the practical help, it actually means that in some cases, and yes, this is an example from our current research, they never get to the point where they actually can do help, or can help, not do help, but where they actually can help, because it's
Paul rejects it.
Yeah, and because the social pedagogy keeps on insisting on this relationship, it kind of misses the key point or the key element that he needs help in this case. Freaking plumbing.
Yeah, it's a practical need.
It's a practical need, yeah.
And in that sense, we haven't talked about it, but finally, somehow the social pedagogue needs to be ready and have a way of handling being rejected by Paul.
And still being emotional, available for building a relationship whenever Paul is ready. And often the road through the common third, in this case, illustrated with plumbing, with the plumbing problem.
And also, I think maybe actually taking or reflect, I think social pedagogue, Michael needs to reflect a bit on, so how much of these sensitive parts of Paul's life could I expect Paul to share with me, because Michael is not sharing anything of the like with Paul.
And what role does sharing these sensitive aspects of my life play in my possibilities for actually helping?
That's a good question, but yeah, the time is almost up. What's going on? It's because we have one of these cameras that moves around. So, okay. I think that was about it. We'll be available for questions and discussions later. And I'm sure Robin will provide you with our contact details. If you feel like it, then just email us. Was that about it?
I think that was about it.
Yeah. And maybe it's important that, you know, with paradoxes, there's never one answer. So that's maybe why, if you feel a bit sort of left behind right now,
we don't have an answer.
There is no answer. No. So yes,
but it's important to be aware. But thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. See ya.